Greetings and God's blessing. One of the greatest evils society faces is the evil of socialism. One of the most common threads woven throughout the fabric of every evil political ideology of recent memory is socialism. Nazism, communism, fascism, radical Islamic fundamentalism, all of them have that common thread of socialism. And many people think, well, it's a good thing because everybody gets to share in everything. Wrong. It is a bankrupt, dangerous, evil system. And it is not a coincidence that communism and Nazism and fascism and radical Islamic fundamentalism adopted socialism as the economic component of their ideology. It's nothing new. You know, my grandmother used to say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. You know, very often, people are easily deceived. Sometimes, oh, it sounds good. It's charity. Let me tell you something. Socialism destroys charity. Let me read something to you from over 100 years ago, from one of the great popes of recent centuries, Pope Leo XIII. He wrote a landmark encyclical called Rerum Novarum. It's an encyclical on capital and labor. And, you know, remember, balance. You always try to have balance. There's a saying in Latin, in media stat rex. You know, in the middle is rectitude. In other words, you don't want to go to extremes. I've often said, don't go to extremes. You know, you don't want to be a radical liberal, and you don't want to be a radical reactionary conservative either. You go off port or starboard from the boat. You know, you fall off the boat, port or starboard, left or right, you're still in the water with the sharks. They'll eat you up. And it's the same thing with almost everything. Sometimes we go too far one way or another. Now, the church is not in favor of that unbridled capitalism which ignores the poor and the disenfranchised. No, that's not good either. However, the answer isn't socialism. Socialism opens the door, takes the lid off of a Pandora's box of evils that history has taught us. Well, they'll follow as soon as morning follows night. Let me read to you from this great encyclical by Pope Leo XIII. Now, this is, he signed this or promulgated this on the 15th of May, 1891. Speaking about socialism. And by the way, in case you don't know it, the United States is going further and further into the trap of socialism. Speaking about this evil, Pope Leo says, in addition to injustice, it's an injustice, in addition to injustice, it is only too evident what an upset and disturbance there would be in all classes of people, and to how intolerable and hateful a slavery citizens would be subjected. The door would be thrown open to envy, to mutual invective, and to discord. The sources of wealth themselves would dry up. For no one would have any interest in exerting his talents or his industry. And that ideal equality about which they entertain pleasant dreams would be in reality the leveling down of all to a like condition of misery and degradation. Hence, it is clear that the main tenet of socialism, community of goods, must be utterly rejected, since it only injures those whom it would seem be meant to benefit. It is directly contrary to the natural rights of mankind and would introduce confusion and disorder into society. The first and most fundamental principle, therefore, if one would undertake to alleviate the condition of the masses, must be the inviolability of private property. And of course, since Pope Leo XIII wrote that, we saw the rise of Nazism, communism, fascism, on and on and on and on. Tremendous evils. Socialism, always a component of those systems. Well, you know, it sounds good, but the government should help the people. The government should provide a framework within which the people can help themselves. Let me tell you one of the most cruel, insidious, evil things you can do to a human being. Take away his dignity, take away his self-worth by handing him everything. A man or a woman has to work to feel good about themselves. Now, can we and should we help people when they're desperately in need of it? Absolutely. But let me tell you something. Beware of a government that really begins to look like the local drug dealer. Beware of a government that will give you things when you're unwary and then addict you to those things. You know, it's like the evil drug dealer. Oh, he'll give the first dose of heroin or cocaine to a prospective customer, then they get hooked. Now he's got an annuity. He's got a customer who will come crawling to his doorstep. Give me more. I need more. And beware of the government acting like the drug dealer by handing out money for bad behavior, for presenting to you a system that looks good. But in the words of Jesus, it's nothing but a whitewashed sepulcher filled with death. Beware of accepting something and not thinking there are strings attached. Why would a government get the people addicted to handouts? Why would they do that? For power. For power. Because then eventually everybody has to kneel at their feet, begging for the next handout. A long time ago, the great author Dostoevsky, speaking of communism, to paraphrase, the evil rulers would reduce them to a state of economic poverty and misery, to become so dependent on the government, from everything from medical care to their daily sustenance. The character said, and they'll come falling on their knees before us, crying out, "Give us bread! Give us bread!" Watch out, America. Watch out, world. Oh, it may seem like a good thing. It sounds charitable. It's anything but charitable. By their fruits you will know them. And so, under the specious pretext of helping the people begin to lose their freedom, a piece at a time. Freedom of this and freedom of that, where you can work or where you can get your medical care, if you can protect yourself in your own home. So many components of this. You know, one of the other consistent threads woven through the fabric of every evil political system we've seen in recent years is to disarm the individual citizen. Oh, well, they can't be trusted to have firearms. You know, only the police should have them. And then all the thugs and criminals are well armed. The individual citizen cowers in his home, wishing that he hadn't been so stupid as to believe the police and military would protect him from the criminals and thugs. Disarming the population, they all did it. The Nazis did it and were more easily able to brutally murder millions of Jews and others. The communists did it and murdered tens of millions. And their task was made much easier because the people were helpless. That's why we have the Second Amendment in the United States. But of course, many there are who will try to eviscerate that of its meaning. Bad things are afoot in America and in the whole world. Private property rights, many places, have just been taken away by governments. You don't believe it? Ask some of the people in some of the African countries, some of the people who've had farms there for generations, just taken away from them. Why? Well, the government needs to have it, and so that everybody can have the land. That's not what it's about. It's about the government usurping power. Ask them in Bolivia, where they did the same thing. And you say it could never happen here. It couldn't happen in the civilized world. It couldn't happen in the United States. Don't go with the flow. As the great Archbishop Fulton Sheen said, dead bodies float downstream. Dead minds, dead souls, dead ideas float downstream. Millions of people in this country are numb between the ears. They have a serious mental defect. They can't think straight. They're like deer caught in the headlights, this glossy look on their faces, imagining some society of utopian bliss. You blink your eyes and wake up a slave. All of us reduced to the lowest common denominator of poverty, misery, and degradation. Do you think it's a coincidence that the drug and alcoholism rate in Russia, in the former Soviet Union, by the way, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, do you think that huge addiction to alcohol and drugs is a coincidence? No. It's because of a lousy system that drained the people of hope and incentive. That's what socialism does. Why bother? We're all reduced to the same low level. And they say, oh, it'll stamp out poverty. No, it won't. It'll widen it and deepen it. And we'll all be equally miserable. Oh, it'll stamp out crime. What if it did? We won't need crime. We'll have a government full of thugs that will provide all the criminal activity you want. Stealing and brutalizing. Don't believe it? Read history. And if we're ignorant of history, we are doomed to repeat it. My brothers and sisters, don't think these things have nothing to do with religion. Oh, these things are very much an object of our consideration from our religious point of view. I'm going to be doing a lot more on this subject in the coming weeks and months and maybe years. We are entering into dark, difficult times. That is why your task, and I'm not talking to some corporate body here, I'm talking to you personally. You personally, the individual. Remember this, God doesn't canonize religious orders, countries, corporations, or any other form of corporate entity. God canonizes individual human beings, one person at a time. It is absolutely essential that you do your part. It is absolutely essential that you be all you can be. Be holy as your Father is holy. Be perfected as your Father in heaven is perfect. That's what Jesus says. And it is not just a matter of your individual salvation, although it is certainly that. But we're talking about your family, your community, your country, the whole world. You know, a failure in this is a failure indeed. You have to be educated and inspired. I am continually saddened by the huge number of Catholics that don't know their faith. You know, 20 years ago, I knew that I had to make teaching the faith an essential element of what I do. It's an essential element of what every priest does, of course. The Catechism of the Catholic Church was a great blessing for the church. There is no reason for any one of you not to be a very, very well-educated person. You don't have to have a university degree. But you've got to learn what's in that catechism up one side and down the other. Because ignorance of it is dangerous. Dangerous for you, dangerous for your family, dangerous for your community, dangerous for your country, dangerous for the whole world. And all of this that I'm talking about, all of this burgeoning evil, this cloud of darkness and death, it seems to be enveloping the whole world. You know, if we say in philosophy, a lot of times you can't immediately know a cause. You have to look at effects and reason back to the cause. Now, I can say this about the whole Western world, but I'll just pick on my own country. in the United States. Okay, I'll be 63 years old this year in May. That's not a terribly long time, but it's long enough to have seen some things come and go. I remember very well what things were like when I was young, when I was a boy growing up in the 50s and 60s. I remember what the average American's life was like back then. Back then when, one serious illness didn't bankrupt you. And the answer to that isn't socialized medicine, by the way. I remember when people were pretty happy. Oh, it doesn't mean they were without problems. No. What you looked at in the movies and on television was relatively wholesome, unlike today, where it is relatively rough. In many, many respects, we have gone downhill. Let me summarize that for you. The moral demise of a nation almost always precedes the ultimate demise of a nation. The economic chaos that we're seeing today, which threatens the very foundations of our way of life, the social unrest, the fear. Have you ever seen so much uncertainty, distrust, and outright fear in our people? Not in my lifetime. Wars, the threat of wars, all of these evils that we're experiencing in what we used to call the greatest nation on the face of the earth. You know why? You see, the pundits will never get it. The politicians will never get it. The vast majority of the educators, professors, teachers, and so forth, they definitely don't get it. You know why all these evils have bubbled up like so much witch's brew in the cauldron of contemporary experience? One word: abortion. And you can't get away from it. Oh, people are tired of hearing about it. I don't want to hear about that anymore. You can't escape. God is not a disinterested spectator to the affairs of man. The Catholic Church teaches that a single abortion is homicide. I submit to you that 50 million abortions, which we've had since Roe versus Wade, that's genocide. And most of the Western world is guilty. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of homicides all over the world. The most innocent, the most vulnerable of God's little children. And we wonder why things are disintegrating in front of them. Until that is remedied, until abortion is erased from the face of the earth, especially in this country, until that happens, we will be able to do nothing right. Wisdom will be taken away from our leadership. We will be able to do nothing right. They won't get it right. They won't fix the economy. It'll go from bad to worse. Wars will multiply. Look at Mexico. The drug cartels, huge power, incredible evil, spilling over into this country. Almost 200 American cities in the United States, almost 200 cities, large and small, have direct presence of the Mexican drug cartels. Even in the biggest town close to where I live in Montana, Missoula, they have a direct representative of the Mexican drug cartels. That evil will not stop. And even more will come. Why? As long as we are guilty of that national, international crime of abortion, which equals genocide. As long as we do that, nothing else will go right. And you are the ambassadors of Christ. You are the ones who will have to go out and educate and inspire all the rest. It's a daunting task. But I remind you, if God is for you, who can be against you? And I also remind you, don't tell me, I'm too little, I'm too old. Yeah, all right. Me too. Remember what St. Paul said. It is when I am weak that I am strong. God's mighty power is brought to perfection in weakness, in little ones. That's who he uses. They're the commandos, the special forces of God's army. And you better get tough, and you better get educated, and you better get inspired, and you better do it right now. Your soul and the souls of your children and your grandchildren are at stake. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. God love you. God bless you. And goodbye.